Yeah. Okay. Good morning, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of Neighbourhood Services Committee, obviously in the rather extraordinary times of the new municipal year. As such, this meeting is a remote meeting being live streamed on the website and recorded. I will now hand over to Denise Wimpany from the Democratic Services team.
Thank you, Chair. We'll begin the meeting by way of a roll call of all those in attendance remotely, and may I request members to confirm they have a paper copy of the agenda and can both hear and see councillors in the meeting. I'll now begin the roll call. Councillor S. Akers-Belcher, we have received apologies with Councillor Tony Richardson as substitute. Councillor Cassidy?
I'm here and I've got all the paperwork.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter? Councillor James?
Yes, I'm here and I have the papers.
Councillor Little?
I'm here and I've got all the papers.
Councillor Prince?
Yep, to everything.
And Councillor Tennant. Thank you, Chair. That now concludes the roll call. Just to remind members before we start that there's a hand raising facility if you would like to raise a question, which will be monitored by the Chair and ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item 1, we have the apologies for absence. I have received a notification of apologies for absence from Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher, and we've got Tony Richardson in as nominated substitute. Are there any other apologies? No. Okay, so we're moving on to agenda item number 2. Did we receive it? The minutes of the last meeting. Are there any points to be made on that? No? Okay. There's no budget and policy framework. Key decisions 5.1, local transport plan scheme update. Hand over to Tony Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for a delivery programme of safety schemes across Hartlepool for the financial year 2020-2021. This committee approved the local transport plan earlier this year on the 13th of March 2020. Within this report, a number of local safety schemes and safer routes to school were proposed. Safety schemes are requested from residents and elected members across the borough and are also identified through a review of accident statistics. The level of demand for such schemes often exceeds the local transport plan budget, and as such, a scrutiny assessment is undertaken by the team to develop the preferred list of schemes within that available funding. Analysis of each request is undertaken based on factors such as accident data, speed survey results, the presence of a school playground, high pedestrian usage, and community concerns raised. Accident figures are scored on a point system basis, whereby 3 points are scored for an accident classified as fatal, 2 for serious, and 1 for slight, and this helps with the prioritisation process. A programme of potential safety schemes has been developed, and this builds on the prioritisation approach approved by this committee in October 2019. All potential schemes have been included in the listed Appendix 1, and were prioritised using the criteria mentioned in Section 3. However, it's worth noting, members, that Oxford Road and Stockton Road have since been added to that, although won't be on the Appendix 1 as shown. These only came in earlier this week and have recently been added by the team and have been noted by the section. What I would note is that the addition of those does not affect the outcome of the proposed schemes being placed forward for 2021, and those schemes are Raby Road from Hart Lane to Chester Road, Raby Road from Chester Road to Powlett Road, Lansdowne Road, and Elwick School Safety Scheme. It's recommended that members note the continuation of the oversubscribed LTP budget and the requirement for prioritisation. To note that the list is live and further schemes may be delivered should savings within the 2021 programme become available and identified. That the proposed safety scheme be approved for 2020-2021, and it is recommended that committee approves any changes to the proposed programme be delegated to the Director of Regeneration and Neighbourhoods in consultation with the Chair of Neighbourhood Services Committee. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tony. I have we've got a hand up from Marjorie James. So, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise some queries on the actual report, and particularly around 4.8, which is Lansdowne Road. I note that from the report that it's down to have traffic humps put into the street, and I would suggest that before that happens, which is quite a costly outcome, and in particularly residents don't like humps, that we actually consider extending the one-way system to include Lansdowne Road and the streets in between it and Wansbeck Avenue, Wansbeck Road, and that we also look at extending it in the other direction beyond Belmont, so that all of those streets would be one way. And I think that may be preferable. I have no issue about having the raised table at the junction with Lister Street. I just think that it would be a better outcome. Now, do you want to deal with that, Chair, before I go on to other questions on Appendix 1 and 2?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. I'll hand over to Tony to.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think in response to Councillor James' point, what we can do is what we do within every scheme is we consult with local residents. So I think in light of what Councillor James has said, happy to take that back and discuss it with the team, and we can factor that into the proposal.
Okay, thank you very much.
Would it actually replace the proposal? Because if you're making them one way, you would have to allow them to run for a while to see if it improves the situation.
I think what we would need to do is take account of what Councillor James has asked for, and what we can do is look at that, and then we can bring it either back to the committee or have a discussion separately with Councillor James.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Tony, you're aware I live in those streets, so yeah. I'm aware of the situation a bit better, maybe. Okay, so yeah. Are there any other members, Councillor Tennant, that you want to bring in before I move on to Appendix 1?
I do have a hand from one other councillor. Are you okay to hand over to the other person? Okay, so we've got Councillor Cartwright.
Chair, thank you. Sorry that you can't see my picture. I've had to call in from my phone today.
It's okay.
Just to thank the officers for including Oxford Road, which is kind of the main reason why I'm here today. What I would do, though, is I would err on the side of caution from Councillor James's recommendation, and leave that the road risk assessment sits to the professionals before we go through another case of what happened at St Aidan's and St Aidan's Crossing. So when this was actually dictated by councillors to officers what to put in, it turned out to be the wrong solution. So I would just let the professionals, I would prefer the professionals make the recommendations rather than councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come back to that, Chair?
Yes, that's
right,
fine.
Because I really object to that. I am not a professional officer, but I am an elected member of Hartlepool Borough Council. And the last time I looked at our standing orders, it's still a member-led authority. So I'm sorry, but my role is to actually bring to play local knowledge and understanding of the situation. I didn't speak about Oxford Road, and I didn't speak about Stockton Road either. I was speaking about the streets where I actually live. And therefore, I think I do have some experience to bring. Arncliffe Gardens, where I live, is the busiest street in the whole of that block, and was so when it was two-way traffic. It's been reduced significantly by having it as a one-way system, and most residents are quite grateful for that. So to extend it to include further streets between Park Road and Elwick Road would, in my view, be a sensible option and resolve some of the problems. I didn't say it would resolve them all, it would need to be monitored. But I do object to being told that I shouldn't have a say. I'm an elected member and will continue to have a say. And if not, well, I may as well just throw my hands in the air and just switch off now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James.
Sorry to interject there, Chair. I never implied that Councillor James shouldn't have a say. What I did say is we should take the advice from the professionals. Absolutely should be included in that, and she should be part of that decision-making process. But all I'm just saying is just be careful that we are not dictating what to do. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cartwright. I think there's been a little bit of misunderstanding here. There's a couple of
there's a recording of the meeting, so we can go back to that if you want to, Chair. And I'm fairly sure that the implication was that members should not have a say and that professionals should make the decisions. So I'm sorry, but I absolutely disagree.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think we'll leave that as it is now, because there are some important business to get through. But I understand both your points. We do have another councillor interested in coming in. We'll hand over to Councillor Tony Richardson. Tony, you need to unmute. Can everybody hear Councillor Richardson? Yeah, you.
I'd like to ask the question on Rosemary Way, the island, the crossing, the build-out, if that's all possible. And what does that class as? One serious and one slight?
Tony Hanson?
Yes, that relates to the accidents that have taken place in that area. That's why it was scored.
Yeah, Tony, you're on mute.
Can't hear.
You're on mute, yeah.
Apologies, that's my fault this time. Yeah, what that relates to is the accidents that have taken place within that particular location. So what it's had is one serious and one slight, and that's why it's scored the numbers that it has in terms of the 3. So 2 for the serious and 1 for the slight.
Okay.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah.
I do believe you've had 2 fatalities on there, on Rosemary Way. I know of 1 for definite, but I'm almost sure there was 2.
Okay. I can't say that I am fully appraised of that, but can we possibly look at that? Is it Tony?
Yeah, we can look at that. As I said, it depends when those fatalities were. They're not, as far as I'm aware, they're not within recent years, but we can certainly look at that. We can certainly look at that, and we will feed back, Chair.
It's also a catchment for 3 schools, isn't it? You know what I mean? And we have asked for a crossing for years on the approach to the cafe area.
Okay, like I say, Councillor Richardson, we will take that into account and look at that. Okay, thank you. Are there any more councillors wanting to come into this topic? Marjorie?
Well, you said that you would come back to me, Chair, for a bit.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I do apologise. Yes, you're right.
Okay. So on Appendix 1, the first question that I've actually got is Blakelock Gardens, Shrewsbury Street. I accept that it has more slight accidents than below, but it doesn't actually say what's being proposed. So I would need to know what's being proposed for that street to be able to have any comment on it or to accept its prioritisation.
Tony, have you got?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would point members, as I said, to the prioritisation list that we've defined. So at the moment, it falls 6th within the list of potentially 50 schemes that are on there. So at the moment, there isn't a scheme identified for Blakelock Gardens, but what we would say is that it doesn't fall within the prioritisation of replacing those that are at the top of that list.
Well, I'm not suggesting that it should, but I would be interested to know what's being proposed. Because it's in a list where there's a proposal for everything else, and further down there are also some proposals, but there's nothing in Blakelock Gardens, so I'm a bit surprised that there isn't. But if I can move on, I also have a question on Rossmere Way, where it says 35 miles an hour. Is that the actual speed limit, or is that the speed that traffic was going at?
It's called the 85 percentile. So what it does is it's based upon all the vehicles that have gone throughout a specific period, and then it averages the speed over that particular time. What I would say is that the police are using that at the moment. They're doing enforcement checks along that particular location. So it's one of the hotspots within Hartlepool whereby the police are checking and they undertake regular checks in that location. So
what is the speed limit?
Sorry, what do you mean, Councillor James?
On Rossmere Way, what is the speed limit?
I don't have those details to hand in terms of what the speed limit is, but what it says is on the 85 percentile, it's on an average, it's coming out at 35 miles an hour for vehicles along that section.
Well, then can I suggest, Chair, that because we don't know what the speed actually is, it is a residential and well-used family area because of the play arrangements and the park on the other side of the road. And I think if it isn't already, it should be considered to be a 20 mile an hour zone.
I do believe it's 30, Margaret. Yeah, Marjorie.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I think it should be considered for a 20 mile an hour.
I agree.
Okay. The other question that I've actually got on that same section is Hart Lane. Can you tell me what VAS is?
No apologies, Councillor James, but I can get that clarified and send it across to you.
Okay. So if I can move further on that report, it's on the next page now. Clifton Avenue for road humps. Is Clifton Avenue not in a conservation area?
Again, I would have
right,
to check that, Councillor James.
Because again, in residential areas, humps are not always the answer. It seems to be the easy solution, but it's not always the acceptable answer. There has been some really good schemes put in at Manor House, where a chicane was used on what is a very busy road, which are out Manor Lane, Wynyard Road, and it's been received excellently. It's made a huge difference. There are also opportunities to put chicanes in so that traffic has to slow because it has to go onto the other side of the road to go past. And it does make a huge difference. It doesn't take up any more space than a hump would take, but it leaves the rest of the road clear. So I just think that we're making poor decisions on what are the options, and that speed humps in residential areas are not always the right answer. And certainly in Sinclair Road, which is also being proposed for road humps, from a personal point of view, I would prefer to see some chicanes go in there, which are actually cheaper to fit and therefore may actually allow more of the work to be done in the schemes that are at the moment are outside the prioritisation list. So I would really like to see some consideration taken, and I've certainly not been consulted as a ward member that covers Sinclair Road, so I would like to have some input to that. And the same comment with Macaulay, that I think I should have some input to that because I'm a ward member for that ward. When you're also proposing Allendale Street, Berwick Street, Carlisle and Farndale Road have humps, and it's the same comment, Chair. I'm not sure that in residential settings that's the best way, because humps take out at least 2 parking spots for each of them. So depending on how many you're going to put in, you're going to have residents cramming for a car parking space. And I think that's all of my comments, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor James. We'll take your points into account. We've got 2 more. Sorry, Tony, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to respond to Councillor James, I think it's worth noting that, as you said, there's over 50 schemes within the list, and some of the suggestions around road humps may have come from residents or members themselves, and not necessarily have come from the team directly. What we do is when they come in, we will look at it, and if we get to a position whereby a scheme will be prioritised, at that point, the professional team will look at the work to see what fits best, working with residents and members to determine what is the most appropriate solution for that particular area. That doesn't necessarily mean every scheme will have a road hump as suggested there. It also is likely where the gaps are that we haven't yet looked at it as well. So there may be no solution, which is why there's some which don't have that in there, just to clarify.
Okay, yeah. So Marjorie, could you take your hand down? That's possible. So we've got Councillor Little. Sue.
It's just to clarify that Rossmere Way is 30 miles an hour, and nobody can, if we did do a 20 mile an hour, nobody can police it. The police can't even police it. We have 20 mile an hour along the seafront, and very, very rarely people stick to that. The police can't police the 30 miles an hour. It's going to be even harder for them to police a 20 mile an hour because a lot of them don't work. The only thing that I find that works is having a digital to tell you how fast you're going. That works, but they cost a lot more than a static sign. So I just thought I'd let you know.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. I don't think there's any more councillors showing any interest in coming in. I think we'll move on to the recommendations. So we got 4 recommendations. I think that's. Is there any dissent to the recommendations? No. Should we just take that as approved? Marjorie, did you want to say something?
Yes, Chair. The only dissent was on Lansdowne Road that it be reconsidered and that we look at a different option.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the recommendations say that it's to be approved, so that Lansdowne Road will be on the list of actions to be taken. But yes, we will take into account the points that you made. If that's okay with Tony.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So if there's no dissent, should we just approve the recommendations? Yeah.
Approved.
Thank you very much, councillors. We'll move on to 5.2, Public Space Protection Orders, PSPOs, and we'll hand over to Sylvia Pinckney. Sylvia.
Thank you, Chair. This item is to seek approval for the commencement.
You're on mute.
On mute.
Sorry. This item is to seek approval for the commencement for the renewal process for public space protection orders that are already in place, and to consider what further public protection orders are or may be required. Public space protection orders give local councils additional optional powers to deal with antisocial behaviour. Council can use public space protection orders to prohibit specific activities and or to require certain things to be done in defined locations in order to stop or prevent antisocial behaviour. The breach of a public space protection order is a criminal offence but can be dealt with through the issue of a fixed penalty notice of £100. Public space protection orders have a maximum duration of 3 years but may be renewed for a further 3 years indefinitely. The PSPOs are not intended to be used to tackle specific individuals or properties, but rather an identified antisocial behaviour problem in known locations. When the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act came in 2014, it automatically replaced a number of illegal controls that were in place at that time, including dog control orders and gating orders. The PSPOs that are due to expire in 2020, and as such, it's necessary for us to consider whether they should be renewed. Two additional PSPOs relating to dog control in relation to length of leads and proof of means to pick up were introduced last year. And although they are not due to expire in October 2020, it is proposed that they are renewed with the other orders so that everything runs to the same timetable in the future. There are currently 7 dog-related PSPOs, which are outlined in point 4.2 of the report. The council also has a number of gating orders in relation to alley gates, most of which were installed to combat antisocial behaviour. These back alleys are legally regarded as highway, and the installation of a gate obstructs the highway, and as such authorisation must be in place to allow for that obstruction to take place lawfully. The gating orders automatically became PSPOs in 2007 and therefore must be renewed in October 2020 for them to continue to have effect. If the PSPO covering the alley gates is not renewed in October, all alley gates covered by the order would need to be left open so as not to obstruct the highway. There are currently no legal restrictions in place in Hartlepool to prevent the consumption of alcohol in public places. Controlling the public consumption of alcohol in defined areas can be achieved by means of a PSPO, but enforcement of the controls must be in accordance with the appropriate procedures. These procedures require that any individual who is consuming alcohol in a designated area to stop drinking or to hand over their drink when asked to by a police officer or another authorised person. Only if they fail to comply with that request would the individual be in breach of the PSPO and be liable to either prosecution or a fixed penalty notice. PSPOs do not automatically create an offence of consuming alcohol in designated areas. The offence only occurs when the individual does not comply with the request to stop or to hand over the alcohol to an authorised person. Signage that a PSPO is in place in a designated area is a legal requirement, and as such, the presence of the PSPO would be advertised to anybody in the area and may be an effective deterrent. PSPOs may only be introduced where there is sufficient and suitable evidence to support them. As such, any proposals received for alcohol-related PSPOs will, by necessity, require the gathering of a considerable amount of evidence. It is proposed that members and key partners are consulted to establish whether any alcohol-related PSPOs are needed, and if there is evidence for such, can be obtained. PSPOs can be introduced to help tackle other persistent antisocial behaviour in any identified area. And it may be that members, there are ongoing problems that members are aware of that could be addressed by the introduction of PSPOs. It's therefore proposed that members and key partners be consulted to establish whether PSPOs could be a useful tool in preventing ongoing issues whilst recognising the statutory limitations that would be required and the evidence base that would be required. It's proposed that consultation on the renewal of the introduction of PSPOs is a statutory requirement and would involve members, Cleveland Police, key partners and the general public. The recommendation is that the committee approves the commencement of a consultation in regards to the renewal of the existing public space protection orders, and that the committee approves the consultation or the commencement of consultation with a view to establishing whether any new public space protection orders are required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. We have 3 councillors interested, and the first one was Councillor Little. Would you like to come in?
I don't know whether any of you are aware, over the lockdown period, one of the bars opened up in Seaton, which caused an awful lot of issues because they couldn't drink inside of the grounds of the pub, and they decided to drink along the prom on the seafront where they had no toilet facilities, so they used people's garden walls to urinate up, and they were exposing themselves walking across the road, getting the bits out, which was absolutely appalling. Me and Lisa must have received about 5,000 complaints over the lockdown period. So I would really, really encourage everybody to have a drinking ban along the prom, because those residents who live closely, nobody has ever predicted a pandemic as what we've just gone through, what we're still going through. But that was absolutely appalling what those residents had to put up with. And we thought there was already a drinking ban along the prom, from Newburn Bridge to the Sandy car park, but unfortunately there isn't, because that could have been stopped. Even a lot of the residents thought it was enforced, but unfortunately it wasn't. And for those residents alone, they went through an awful lot. Even grandkids couldn't go and see the grandparents anyway, but they couldn't even talk through the window because people were exposing themselves. And Lisa wants to talk as well, so can I raise my hand back up for Lisa? Unless you want to come back in later after the other 2.
Yeah, I'll have to give all councillors a chance to speak first, and then we'll bring. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I know that yourself, Sue, and Lisa have raised this point about the prom in Seaton, and I mean that's what we're here for today. We're here to take any options for full consultation to find out whether a PSPO might be useful in your particular area that you've just discussed. We do have 2 more councillors interested. We'll have bring in Councillor Prince and then Councillor James. So, Councillor Prince, are you on mute?
Oh, Councillor James did have a hand up before me. I don't know if she's desperate to speak before me.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise.
Okay.
I do apologise. But you both get your chance anyway, so yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. So with the dog fouling ones, if somebody's dog enters somebody else's property, i.e. like I have a gate on my front garden, if somebody's dog came into my front garden because the gate was open and fouled on my land, would that be an offence?
Sylvia?
I've got to say I would have to check on that one. I'm not 100% sure. It may be a civil matter, but I'm not 100% sure. I can check and find out and let you know.
If you would, please. That's an issue I've had from residents. And my next question is the alley gates. So if somebody leaves the alley gates open, is there repercussions for this and sort of the implications around it? Because I've got an issue in my ward where there's a particular alley gate that's keeps being left open, and teenagers are using the area to congregate because it's kind of hidden from view, so they're doing various things that teenagers do. And so I'm just wondering how to best to proceed with that, please.
Okay, Sylvia.
If you would provide us the details after the meeting, or we will arrange to look into it specifically.
Is that okay, Councillor Prince?
Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. We can move on to Marjorie with Councillor James.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I think 4.2 is excellent, and I think that we should fully support it in the recommendations. On the alcohol issue, like other members, I were under the impression that we already had some alcohol restrictions. In fact, right in front of the civic centre is supposedly a prohibited area. But I would certainly want us, if we're actually looking at it all in the round, is that all of those family areas where you would expect families with children to be in attendance on a regular basis, such as the promenade and the beach at Seaton, the beach on the headland and others, those areas should all be included. Parks should be included, because they're areas where families go. You don't really want somebody sat knocking themselves sideways but with alcohol or anything else, right alongside families that are there to enjoy themselves. So I really do think that we need to look. I mean, the one in front of the Civic Centre was put in because we actually had people sit drinking on the steps of the War Memorial. So those kind of places really do need to be protected. So I'd be very interested in seeing what list is being proposed. And I think that members should definitely have some input to it. On the alley gates, many of which were put in through New Deal for Communities, people used to get burglaries right, left and centre where people just popped over the back wall. That was a major issue. It wasn't so much the antisocial behaviour and the congregations, it was actually theft and burglaries. So I would certainly want to see all of those alley gates protected, because residents have come to rely on them so much for protection. And if I could just give some information to Amy, all residents on a back-streeted arrangement, so you'd have one back street between two streets, will have keys to those back gates, and residents should really just lock them. If they're left open, residents should just lock them, because the dustbin men, etc., all have keys, they can all get in. It's not an issue for the council's services, so any resident in those streets should just lock them.
Okay, thank you very much for your input, Councillor James. Amy, did you say you wanted to come back in there?
Sorry, yes, Chair. I didn't realise my hand was still up. Yeah, just I was a resident in an area with back alley gates keys, and you had to buy them for £15. You didn't automatically get them, so not all residents do have them. So a couple of the residents who've complained to me don't have the keys.
Right, okay. Well, thank you. Well, if you speak to Sylvia after the meeting, be able to resolve that. That'd be great. Marjorie, are you wanting to speak, or with your hand still up there? Thank you. We've got Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, it's just going back on what Councillor James said about the alley gates. Obviously, I live in the Burn Valley ward as well, and I'm also on a street where there is alley gates. There's no signage on the gates whatsoever to say they have to be closed from Hartlepool Borough Council or anything. So maybe that's something the council can take on board, whether they have to put sign on saying these gates must remain closed at all times. And second of all, yes, they do stop theft, but it doesn't stop people climbing over these gates. So maybe something needs to be put in to stop people climbing over them. That's one problem we do have in the Burn Valley ward, where there are thefts going on, especially in this area, with regards to the alley gates. Yes, they can stop people entering via car or whatever, but it doesn't stop people climbing over them. That's all,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cassidy. So I believe that Sue mentioned Lisa wanted to have something to say, but she seems to be busy. Lisa, did you want to say a couple of things?
Yeah, sorry. As I was one of the Seaton Ward councillors who wanted to put a drinking ban in place along the promenade and on the beach, I just wanted to give you my reasons behind it. We do a beach clean. We have a lot of residents and the big town tidy up come along the beach and clean the beach. The amount of broken bottles and glasses that are on the beach from warm sunny days like today, it becomes quite dangerous. And when most children walk on the sand, they walk in bare feet. So an alcohol ban could prevent people taking glass bottles of beer, etc., onto the beach, which would then help with keeping the beach clean in turn with, you know, the safety of the children. Most pubs, I don't know if you realise, now have a takeaway licence. The government automatically implemented that every pub now automatically has a takeaway licence. So the amount of pubs that are in Seaton at the moment that are doing takeaway drinks, and they are then walking over the road and going to the water play area, sat drinking while their children are running about, the same way as behind one of the local pubs there is our park, again, where people are congregating with takeaway alcohol from the pubs to be able to drink. We also have a pub along the Reach where they do have a beer garden, which they're now allowed to use, but they congregate along the wall because they're only allowed to sit in 6 or 8, I can't remember which one it is. When there's larger parties, they don't want to be separated, so they sit on the outside, and it can be quite intimidating for people who just want to walk along the prom. Myself, doesn't really bother me. Or when I do go for a run, I make sure I run past that pub so I don't look like I'm a bit of a walker. So yes, the a drinking ban along the prom and on the beach would be absolutely ideal for a holiday place like. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your input there, Lisa. Just to clarify that about the public space protection order, it would not be a ban. It would be basically it can't be seen as a creation of an offence. What it is.
I do understand. I did listen, I did listen and understand that it is too. If people are drinking in that space, they can be asked for the drinks to be removed, and then a fine will be put in place when they don't. But when we put signages up all around Seaton in areas where we would like to prevent it, then hopefully that will become a deterrent. And when we get on the phone to poor Sylvia on a weekend to say people are drinking in the areas where they're not allowed, then we can send officers in the right direction to be able to prevent that. And the more times that we tell people that they can't drink in that area, then the more times the message will get through, and eventually they'll just stop coming and drinking in Seaton, and then we become a family orientated place rather than a place where people we go to sit in the sun and get absolutely trolleyed. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting again.
No problem at all. No, it's fine. I mean, it's the whole point of this meeting is to actually take into account any areas that any establishment of new public space protection orders, and of course you've made the case for Seaton, and I would we have had the discussion before this meeting that we would take Seaton in as part of the consultation of this new PSPO. We do have one more councillor, Councillor Richardson. You want to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask, like the antisocial behaviour and the drinking that on a weekend. How do we report it on a weekend?
Sylvia, would you be...
There's no outside number, is there?
Sorry, the antisocial behaviour can, if it's a persistent problem, then I'm happy for you to have my number to contact me, and I will pass the information on to the team. We do have officers working on a weekend, and it is possible to get in touch with them specifically, but their numbers aren't necessarily public numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great. So if you could take your hand down there, Tony. Yeah. Well, we've got Councillor Prince. Wants to come back in? Are you still on mute?
Thanks,
Easily
Chair.
done. Needs to be done.
Sylvia, so if these staff work on a weekend but their numbers aren't public, would councillors be able to have them? Because I always advise residents to call 101 on a weekend.
Because of their shift patterns, I've got to check their shift patterns to see who's actually working. It's not necessarily the same people that would be working each weekend. Yeah, by all means, you can ring 101 and pass the information on that way. But we do have our own officers out as well over a weekend.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I hope that satisfies your curiosity there, Amy. Thanks, great. So we've got Tom Cassidy. Cassidy, you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Sylvia. Obviously, last week the government announced that they're going to bring in over £1 million for Cleveland Police. So, what in respect will Hartlepool get in regards to getting more PCSOs on the ground? And I know obviously there's a difference between having proper bobbies on the street and as opposed to PCSOs. Where do you think Hartlepool will lie with getting more PCSOs on the ground? Thanks, Jeff.
First answer on that is, as far as I can see, is that would have to be a question for Cleveland Police. They are not present in the room at the moment. But I don't know whether you maybe want to ask them directly that. But would Tony be able to give us a bit of an update on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can add that if there was a press release, I think went out about 2 weeks ago, which obviously referred to the fact that there was additional officers being brought into the Hartlepool area. So the new Chief Constable is very keen on neighbourhood policing. He finds that the work of the Hartlepool Community Safety Team is very effective at getting out into neighbourhoods and communities and doing what he feels is the right policing model. And as a result of that, more officers have gone in. And I think, as I said, there was a press release went out about 2 weeks ago on that. What I can do is, if that helps Councillor Cassidy, I can forward that press release on to you. I can speak to Comms after the meeting and forward that on if that helps. Yeah,
that's fine. It's basically, Chair, just to say more or less, it's okay bringing all these PCSPOs in, but we need obviously the manpower to enforce these, and that's really what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councillor Cassidy, for your input. We know that I can see that Councillor Little wants to come back in. Sue, and then we really need to move on to the votes. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say I have got Sylvia's mobile number because of what happened over lockdown. Wouldn't it be better if the enforcement officers had a works mobile that they could, like, if I don't know what the shift pattern is. I don't know whether they do a 12-hour shift and they're on all day, okay, especially on a weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Couldn't they have a works mobile? Then that gets charged up overnight, and then to the next people come back okay, on. So all must go to the office to sign on or whatever. Just an idea.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, I think I'm sure all of this will be taken into account when we look at the PSPOs, where we want to put them, reasons why we want to put them in, and how enforceable is it. I'm sure we should take all these ideas across. Okay. So Tom, you think you still got your hand up? Are you wanted to speak? No. Okay. So I think we'll put an end to the debate and move on to the recommendations. We've got 2 recommendations which need to be voted separately. So we've got 11.1. That committee approves the commencement of consultation with a view to the renewal of all existing public space protection orders. So is there any dissent from councillors on that one? Okay, that's approved. We move to 11.2. That committee approves the commencement of consultation with a view to establishing whether the new public space protection orders are required. Is there any dissent to that? No. Thank you very much, councillors. That is approved. So we move on to 6.1, allotment service review and dispute resolution process. This is the risks and the legal implications. So we move on to bring into Neil Wilson. Neil, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, the purpose of this report is to advise members of the committee of the risks and legal implications of their decision regarding the allotment services and the dispute resolution process that was made back in March. That arose from a motion passed at full council on the 20th of February to review the dispute resolution process in respect of allotments, to specifically allow for a review stage outside of the department. and such process must be completed before any eviction action is taken. Now, at the point that motion was passed, there was already a process in place whereby there was an informal discussion with a tenant, a first warning letter, a second warning letter, a notice to quit, and also recourse to the corporate complaints procedure. Now, the corporate complaints procedure in itself recommends an investigating officer from a separate department, and the corporate complaints procedure is also monitored by Finance and Policy Committee, with there being an annual report going to that committee and a 6-monthly monitoring report. Now, in addition to the process that was already in place, this committee recommended a further 2 stages, that if dissatisfied by the outcome of the pre-formal stage of the corporate complaints procedure, there is recourse to and a further right of review to a chief officer from another department. There's also the addition of a referral to the Audit and Governance Committee for final consideration of any complaint or dispute. I have a number of concerns arising from those issues, and regrettably, this committee wasn't advised of those back in March, and has only come to light recently, and once the full process has been plotted out and a few worked examples have been thought through. But in essence, we now have a process in place where I'm unclear where the Audit and Governance Committee is expected to fit in respect of the corporate complaints, i.e. is it before corporate complaints, after corporate complaints? There are a number of other options that would be available also that I've included within the report in respect of an allotment holder, i.e. once a notice to quit was issued, there would be recourse to a county court to seek injunctive relief. That in itself would have a number of appeal mechanisms. There is, of course, the local government ombudsman, and I think this is the main nub of my concerns, that the process that is being proposed, it would prevent a tenant from having recourse to the local government ombudsman within a reasonable time frame. If it was that we had to follow through the whole procedure, which the local government ombudsman would insist upon, we could be talking many months, if not years, but before a tenant could actually get to the ombudsman, which would be the first body independent of the council. So quite often in corporate complaints, a complainant is eager to get to the local government ombudsman stage, to have what they view as the independence that body offers. So we would be both depriving a tenant of that opportunity, but also we would be essentially paralysing ourselves and be able to respond to complaints made by others, including other allotment holders, for a breach of allotment rules. So, for example, an allotment holder whose life may be being made a misery by another allotment holder, who is, by way of an example, say, allowing unauthorised people onto the allotment, say groups of teenagers drinking. That complaint was made to the council, made to the local councillor. We would have this process in place whereby it will take a considerable period of time before any meaningful action could be taken. There would, of course, be the informal discussion. There'd be the month of warning letters. If nothing was resolved by that point, there would be a notice to quit. There'd then be the possibility of county court. There'd be the existing appeal to the Heritage and Countryside Manager. There would then be the proposed appeal to a chief officer from another department. Then, if I understand correctly, would be the corporate complaints procedure, which would then be a senior manager who undertaken the training from another department to investigate. Then there would be the opportunity for the local government ombudsman to review the case. and then there would be the opportunity of judicial review. So we've got an extremely truncated process in place that I fear wouldn't protect either tenants or people affected by breaches of allotment rules. In terms of legal risks, the authority has to, of course, discharge its duties efficiently. That's both enshrined in the Constitution, and it's a matter of public law. It's a public law duty. Now, a failure to do that efficiently is in itself maladministration, and that would be subject to challenge by the Ombudsman and by judicial review. So by way of an example, as I mentioned earlier, if an allotment holder was affected by the bad behaviour of another, and after 6 months we'd done nothing about it, because our process prevents us doing that, that allotment tenant could then complain to the Ombudsman, and I fear we'd have very little by way of defence to the process that we've put in place, because the pure time that it would take to go through would prevent us from being reactive and from discharging our duties to manage the allotment effectively. So the purpose of this report is essentially to bring these issues to the attention of members before the matter is referred back to full council, so you can have a holistic picture of the whole process now that it's been mapped out. So it is for members to note the contents of the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that there may be.
Thank you very much, Neil. We have one councillor at the moment, so Marjorie, you wanted to speak. Councillor James.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I understand the issues that Neil's outlining, and I accept that they're probably right. Don't have an issue with that. The problem that is actually being experienced by a number of councillors, which is why the decision was taken to recommend that there be a member involvement in the process, is that we are regularly lobbied by various members of the public who own or rent an allotment site from the council, that the council is taking liberties, that they're too quick to punish, that their processes aren't right, that officers are lying to them. All sorts of things are said to members, either in ward surgeries, by email, etc. And that is why members felt at that point that we needed to have an element of the structure where members could be involved in the decision making. Because if we are not involved, and this is not about having a go at officers, let me make that really clear, right? It's that we can't defend our officers because we don't know what they've actually done. Members could turn up at ward surgeries and shove loads of paperwork under your nose, say, oh, look at this, they've said that, or this has happened, or that's happened. And there's absolutely no way of unpicking it all. So members need to be involved in the process because A, it's expected by members of the public that their ward members are involved in the process. And B, it means that our officers would actually be protected by members who are better informed and have an actual element within the process to actually be involved in the decision making. Because at the moment, we're just left that our officers are being attacked, they're being undermined, and they're being ridiculed by certain members of the public, and we can't defend them, Neil. So we need to be able to have something that allows us to intervene and to decide whether, if the officer has made a mistake, that's pointed out in a protected sense to the officer concerned, but that members of the public feel that officers are not free to just wield the axe as they see fit, which is the comment that's being made on a regular basis by a number of allotment holders.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. And Neil, have you got a response?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor James. I understand the background to the motion that was passed and how this came to be. What I would point out is that there is member oversight by way of the Finance and Policy Committee and the reviewing and monitoring function that's already in place there. What we have now is a quite unique situation constitutionally and nationally, as far as I can see, in the processes that are in place in respect of our allotment service. It's not consistent with our constitution and the corporate complaints procedure. And whilst I appreciate and absolutely accept that it's not a case of criticising officers and is in a way of protecting officers, but very much the recourse to the local government ombudsman requires officers to be as transparent and above board as can be achieved. The ombudsman themselves, in a case of bad conduct or bad faith, if they were to find that, would no doubt name an officer within
Chair,
their
can I just
reporting.
comment that Neil keeps breaking up? I'm not getting everything that he's saying.
Ah, right, okay.
Sorry, is that shared by everyone, or is that?
Is everybody else okay with it? I see, right.
Sounds all right to me.
Neil, do you want to sum up again? Sorry, I apologise for that. Sorry,
Councillor James. I hope you're able to pick this up. I think you're the only one experiencing the difficulties at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think just in summary, what I was saying was that there is member involvement, review and monitoring, and also officers and any officer making these decisions has to be accountable to the ombudsman ultimately, and regardless of the process we put in place, they would be accountable to the ombudsman, because we can't remove that tranche of the procedure, and that's statutorily required. So I would urge members to re-look at the process that's in place, and to consider it in light of how we could react to complaints from other allotment holders who are affected by bad behaviour, and to try and maybe think through some worked examples of how best we could remedy those situations. And whilst I appreciate at the moment you may be lobbied by tenants who feel that they've been dealt with harshly, but equally we may go to the other extreme where you're lobbied by allotment tenants who are saying, well, why aren't the council doing something about this bad behaviour? Why aren't they managing the allotments effectively? Why can't they get the antisocial people from next door off, or sanction them in any way? So I think we need to try and establish some sort of balance between the duties of the council to effectively manage it, but also the protection of the tenants. So it's more balanced and fair to both sides, without unnecessarily dragging the process out, which would be in no one's interests.
Thank you, Neil. Are there any other councillors wanting to come in on this? Okay, doesn't appear to be the case. Okay, well, we'll move straight to the recommendation 5.1. Is there any dissent to the recommendation? No? Marjorie, do you want to say something? You on mute.
Chair, I'd like to register an abstention.
Abstention, okay. So, right. It looks like that's it's been approved with one abstention. Thank you very much, councillors. I think that is the end of business for the day. Thank you all for your attendance and your patience with obviously social distancing and so on. Wish you all the very best for the weekend, and we'll see you at the next Neighbourhood Services Committee meeting. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.